Because when someone mistreats you, they don't just hurt you, they often convince you that you're the problem. They break down your self-esteem little by little until you start believing that their mistreatment is justified. They will tell you things like, if you weren't so sensitive, or if you wasn't so difficult, I wouldn't have to treat you like this. Things like, look what you made me do. And after hearing this enough, you kind of start to believe it. There's something that we've all seen from time to time, and it's almost maddening when you see it play out. You've got a friend who is in a relationship with somebody who disrespects them, who talks down to them, maybe even cheats on them, and no matter how much they cry, no matter how much they complain, they still stay. But then on the flip side of all of that, you'll see that same friend meet someone who is thoughtful, someone who's consistent, someone who's caring, and then what do? They lose interest, they pull away, and then eventually they leave them. Now, you got to admit that this doesn't make sense. You would think that kindness would be better. You would think that decency would be better. But in reality, we see this pattern over and over again. People clinging to those who hurt them the worst and running off those who really care for them. But let's start with the first half of this scenario. Why do people stay with someone who mistreats them? One of the biggest reasons that I see is familiarity. We're drawn to what feels familiar, even if it's not healthy. So if we think about it, if you grew up in a home where love was unpredictable, maybe one day you was given a pat on the back because of something good that you did, and then the next day you was criticized. Your brain starts to believe that that's what love feels like. Love becomes tied to inconsistency. Love becomes tied to tension. So when you're older and you meet someone who mistreats you, there's something inside of you that says that this feels like home, that this feels right. Not because it's good, but because it's familiar. And it's really tragic when we start thinking like this, because the very thing that hurt us as children often becomes the thing that we chase when we become adults. If your dad yelled a lot, but also hugged you on occasions, if your mom withheld affection, but occasionally praised you, you kind of learn to associate love with highs and lows, not with steadiness. So as an adult, when you're with someone who mistreats you, it doesn't immediately register as wrong. It registers as normal. And that's one of the scariest traps that a lot of people fall into. Another reason why is going to be what I've learned to be intermittent reinforcement. It's kind of like when you go to the casino and you spend so much money trying to hit that jackpot. And then after so much money that you've spent, you finally hit that jackpot. It really does feel rewarding. You pull that lever over and over, and most of the time, nothing happens. But every once in a while, you hit the jackpot. It's that unpredictability that makes it addictive. Now, if you knew that you would lose every time, you stop playing, right? But if you knew that you was going to win every time, perhaps it would start to get a little boring to you. But it's that maybe this time is what keeps you hooked on it. And I realized that relationships with mistreatment often follow that same pattern. The mistreating partner isn't mistreating 24 hours, 7 days a week. And what they do is they sprinkle moments of kindness, apologies, and maybe affection. And it's those little moments that become the jackpot to those who's being mistreated. They may have to go through a whole week of coldness and neglect, but when that sweet moment shows up, it feels euphoric. And in the mistreated person's mind, it's like, there it is. That's the person that I fell in love with. And then all of a sudden, the mistreatment feels kind of somewhat worth it. It's something how the brain gets addicted to the cycle of pain and reward. Another reason why someone would stay with someone who mistreats them is going to be because of fear. And I'm not talking about fear of the person. I'm talking about fear to leave the person. Because let's be honest here, leaving isn't easy. It means starting over. It means facing the unknown. And for some people, the unknown feels scarier than the mistreatment that they're used to. It's almost like that they're telling themselves, at least I know what I'm dealing with here. at least I'm not alone. They begin to ask themselves questions such as, what if I leave and I end up with someone worse? What if I never find anyone at all? Sometimes fear of being alone is one of the biggest anchors that keep people in unhealthy relationships. They convince themselves that mistreatment is better than emptiness, that the pain with someone is better than peace with no one. And when you're terrified of loneliness, you hold on to almost anything that keeps you from facing it, even if it costs you your self-respect. But we also have to understand that mistreatment often comes with something even darker, and that is shame. Because when someone mistreats you, they don't just hurt you. They often convince you that you're the problem. They break down your self-esteem little by little until you start believing that their mistreatment is justified. They will tell you things like, if you weren't so sensitive, or if you wasn't so difficult, I wouldn't have to treat you like this. Things like, look what you made me do. And after hearing this enough, you kind of start to believe it. And you kind of start thinking that, well, maybe it is my fault. Maybe I am too much. Maybe I did deserve the mistreatment. And once you start to believe that you deserve the mistreatment, leaving doesn't even become an option. And to me, that is one of the cruelest trick of mistreatment. It makes you doubt your own self until you settle for the crumbs and call it a meal. Probably the most heartbreaking reason why people stay is going to be hope, because they remember the good moments. They remember how things were at the beginning. They cling to the idea that if they just love harder, if they can just prove themselves a little bit more, the mistreating party will change. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being hopeful in your relationship, but in the wrong place, it can really cause a lot of damage. People stay in abusive relationships because they hope that tomorrow will be different, even if yesterday and today has been filled with a lot of pain. They start to justify their decision to stay with the person by telling themselves that, well, if I can just be patient long enough, they'll come around, because deep down, they are a good person. And maybe they are. Maybe they truly are a good person, but that doesn't erase the harm and the hurt that's being done right now. So for a lot of people, their hope that the relationship will become better becomes their lifeline in the relationship. And for many, it's the last thing that they are willing to let go of. And so now that we know why people choose to stay with someone who mistreats them, let's take the second half of this scenario. Why do people leave someone who's nice to them? Now, if you think that it's tragic that people stay with those who mistreat them, it's just as equally puzzling that people would leave those who are nice to them. But I know what's on your mind. You're probably wondering, why in the world would someone walk away from someone who is kind to them? Why would anyone run from someone who shows them respect and who actually cares for them? One of the biggest reasons why someone will leave someone who really loves them is because the kindness and the love feels foreign. It feels strange. Because if that person that I told you about that associate love with drama, with tension, with inconsistency, then calmness in their life, it feels uncomfortable. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel safe. It feels suspicious. Someone who listens to you, someone who respects you, someone who doesn't raise their voice at you. If you're not used to that, your brain doesn't trust it. You kind of start waiting for the mask to come off, and you think that this is too good to be true, that can't nobody be this nice. And so instead of settling down in it, people tend to sabotage it. Not because the person did anything wrong, but because the love and the kindness triggers your belief that real love has to be dramatic. There are actually a lot of people out there who have been in certain types of situations, environments, atmospheres, and abusive relationships to where when they do come across somebody who show love and affection, they absolutely cannot take it. Another reason is because people confuse peace with boredom. Now, we live in a world where drama is glamorized. On social media, in the movies, even in our music, they all tell us that love is supposed to be fiery, it's supposed to be chaotic and full of ups and downs. And if it's not intense, it must not be real love. So when someone nice comes along, someone who's consistent, someone who's steady, someone who's drama free, it doesn't give that adrenaline rush that so many people are used to. And consequently, instead of feeling safe, they feel unstimulated. Instead of calling it healthy, they call it boring. But the truth is this, is that what people call boring in a nice person is often just emotional stability. It's the absence of games. It's the absence of manipulation. And for someone who's addicted to chaos, for someone who's addicted to drama, that can really make them feel empty. And then too, there is the challenge factor. When someone mistreats you, you spend a lot of time and energy trying to win them over. You're constantly trying to prove your worth, constantly chasing their approval. And in doing that, it kind of makes the relationship feel earned. But when someone is already kind to you without you having to fight for it, it can feel a little bit too easy. And that's why for those people who value the things that they struggle for, someone who's loving and kindness really can't do too much for them. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but it's real. Because some people need the battle in order to believe that the victory was worth anything. Oh, and let's not forget that sometimes people mistake kindness for weakness. So if you grew up believing that strength equals control, then a partner who listens, who compromises, who show empathy might feel a little bit soft. You might misinterpret the kindness, the lovingness as inability to lead, or even gentleness as a lack of passion. But we all know that that's not true. But that is the lens that a lot of people look through. And when they misinterpret niceness as weakness, then they lose attraction. But I come to find out that possibly the deepest reason why someone would leave someone who's loving and kind to them is going to be actually self-worth. That's going to be the people who don't believe that they deserve love. And they feel like that being loved is too uncomfortable. Maybe it's someone who was in a bad previous relationship. Maybe they were with someone that really devalued them, made them feel unworthy, belittled them a whole lot, made them think that there was something wrong with them. And so when you come across someone who wants to really show you love, then you push that person away before they can see any flaws or even get the chance to reject you. Because if you will, it's always easier to leave first than to risk being left. And that's why so many people will say that I want someone who's going to love me, but when they get it, they don't know how to handle it. And so when you put it all together, it makes a kind of tragic kind of sense that people stay with those who mistreat them because of familiarity, because of fear, because of shame, because of hope, the addictive of the cycle of pain and reward. But they will leave those who treat them well because kindness feels foreign, because peace is boring, because they crave the challenge, because they mistake kindness for weakness, and because they don't feel worthy of it. Even though real love hurts sometimes, real love is not supposed to hurt. You get that? Even though it hurts sometimes, it's not supposed to hurt deliberately. Real love is not supposed to keep you guessing. Real love is not supposed to make you feel like you're in a war that you have to survive in. So the real question should not be, why do people do this? The real question should be, how do we break the cycle of it? How do we retrain our heart to crave kindness instead of chaos? How do you unlearn the lies that you've been taught about love all of these years? How do we get to the place where we no longer run from what's good for us and no longer cling to what destroys us? That is going to be a real journey. And until we do it, we'll just keep repeating the same old patterns over and over again, confusing mistreatment with love and rejecting the very thing that can actually heal us.